and welcome to episode 8 of GP Red Presents. We're talking about virtual engagement in communities. This is actually highlights from a variety of conversations that we had with some communities, including Mark Berry, who is the Director of Parks and Recreation for Groton, Connecticut, Sean DePalma, who is the former Director of Parks and Recreation in Stonecrest, Georgia, and is now the Quality of Life Manager in Panama City, Florida, and also Lisa Wolff, who is a Project Manager for GreenPlay. I'm Dr. Teresa Penbrook, and we are featuring some GreenPlay projects here, but this is really for an educational purpose, to allow you to hear how directors are finding success in community engagement even during these current times of the pandemic, and how we can actually think about the considerations that you might want to look at before you engage your public, your stakeholders, and your staff. So please like, subscribe, and comment on the video below. And if you have any additional topics that you would like to hear conversations about, please let us know at GP Red. Enjoy. Thanks. I know that as a director, you obviously are talking to people all the time and trying to figure out what the best way is to provide the services that you provide in your community. During the time that we are in right now with the pandemic, we are in the middle of trying to figure out how to talk to people when we can't necessarily meet face to face. And so some of the techniques have moved towards really doing online community engagement. We've been using online community engagement for a long time, but it's kind of new to some people. So can you talk a little bit about your history with community engagement itself and then also online community engagement?
We do quite a bit of public engagement, both within our programs and community-wide. And since as we were getting into this project, which we're pretty excited about, COVID-19 was kind of sweeping the country, and we had a little bit of hesitation as we moved, okay, how are we going to do this? But, the GreenPlay team shared with us their, I think you call it MO, your mobile optimization engagement.
Mobile optimized engagement, right.
Yes. And, we looked at that, and we said, these guys have they've given this a lot of thought. And, we felt that our team, after reviewing it, felt pretty comfortable that we would be able to get the information that we needed in order to move the project that we're working on forward.
So I know that you recently went through a series of focus groups and public meetings using mobile optimized engagement. Can you talk, as you did that, was there anything that you had to learn new, or was it different in terms of how you felt like you were participating in that engagement process?
It was different in that somebody would, get on their computer and type in a question, and then somebody would read off what the question was, and then somebody from the staff would reply back with an answer to the question. But I think the information that came out of that is not any different than if we had all been sitting in a room and discussing it in that way. I think the information was still the same, and it was still very valuable.
So do you have any kind of feeling, I don't know if you counted numbers, but do you have any feel for, did more or fewer people participate because it was online? Did you get any take on that?
We had 40 people, or 49, I think, people sign up to participate. And I think a little over 30 actually participated in it. Mm-hmm. I think that the really encouraging part of that was that, and I was watching the numbers on the screen, all 30 plus people that signed on, they all stayed on until the very end of the meeting. So I guess they could have walked away. Yeah, they did. I suppose they could have walked away, but I was really encouraged by that.
So if you had a buddy or a friend who's a director in another community call you and say, hey, should I do this or not? What would you tell them around using online community engagement?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Like I said earlier, even though the process was much different than any of us are used to, I still think we got the information, the critical information that we needed in order to get us to a place where we were going to, develop the questions from the needs assessment. I mean, the alternative of either waiting and who knows how long, we're going to be in the situation we're in, or not doing anything at all, for me wasn't really an option.
Yeah. So if we were not in a pandemic right now, would you be open? Would you feel like online community engagement would be a valuable tool, or how do you feel about that? Would you rather go back to the traditional in-person engagement? What are your thoughts about the value of either process?
Well, it's interesting. One of the things that we've been thinking about a lot in our department is, there's always kind of this practice of you put out flyers and you say, come to, the town hall meeting room, and, there's an expectation that people are going to come to that. Well, we're trying to recognize the fact that we really need to be flipping this around and not having this expectation that people are going to come to us. We really should be going to them. The virtual meeting, maybe that provides an opportunity for somebody that wouldn't necessarily feel comfortable going to a place that we've invited them to, but if they're in their own home, they may be more apt to engage with us in whatever we're doing. So I think, perhaps a combination of both would maximize our penetration throughout the community.
That's great. So did you find that you have many people participate in using, I know you utilize Zoom webinar features for your meetings, correct? And those were facilitated.
Yes. Yep.
Did you find that very many people used the chat features to actually make comments, or the question and answers features? Did you have much participation from that type of aspect?
Oh, we did. There was a ton of questions coming in. Yeah, we could barely keep up with all of the questions. Yeah, no, that was great. That, in addition to them, because I think the meeting went about an hour and 20 minutes. So in addition to, folks staying on the whole time, there was a lot of questions, right up until the end, which was great.
That's exciting, because a lot of times in public meetings or even in focus groups, we may get people who want to give their opinions, but we don't often see that kind of engagement with just tons of questions. So one of the things that I have learned is that people feel, if they're participating from their couch, they often feel a little bit more informal, and they're willing to type in something rather than, certainly a lot of people are shy about raising their hands in public meetings or speaking. Right. And so it gives them a way to do that without having to put themselves on the spot.
I certainly see part of, these types of engagements continuing on, because I think people are going to realize that, it's just another tool, and it's positive.
Can you talk a little bit about any pros or cons relative to doing, I know that in the middle of your project, we were suddenly shifted to using primarily online community engagement, and that wasn't necessarily the original intent. And obviously the pandemic hit and we needed to do that. But I think we were able to, my perception is we were able to pretty effectively make that shift for a large portion of the engagement. Can you talk a little bit about the pros and cons and what differences between the online engagement portion, which was primarily information gathering, going through into basically the presentation, the findings, the results, and trying to get people to get buy-in there. Can you talk a little bit about that process?
I feel that for going through the process of master planning for a community during being interrupted by the pandemic, in this case, which was COVID-19, was a challenge, but it was one that the firm, the department adapted well to. We were fortunate enough, and I'm grateful that the bulk of the community input was executed in person, with in-person interviews, in-person meetings, open house style meetings. So we did have that advantage that the actual data collection from the community that was completed in person. Now, having the pandemic intersect us during the process as we're moving through the project, and then going to the online platform for findings and so forth, was a challenge. It was one that the firm, I feel, adapted extremely well to. Attendance was much less on the virtual side, but you have to keep in mind that there was a few factors there. The fact that it wasn't that we had a rainstorm, so we changed something. It was that we were actually going through a pandemic. So people were focused on many other higher priority factors in this case. And the other factor was that a large portion of the participants that were interested in the findings were more senior and veteran members of the society, which at this time they weren't as versed in technology. So they kind of bottomed out. So for a pro, I feel we adapted very quickly. I feel the platform we had was very effective in the fact that we were able to have the mayor and council present, several other key stakeholders within the community present for our virtual meeting. And we were able to put up a PowerPoint and give some visual aids to the meeting, which were helpful.
I think the towns were a little hesitant at first to offer this opportunity or to be able to participate in the opportunity for the live online engagement pieces. So we worked together, as I mentioned, with our GreenPlay team and developed a really unique process through our Zoom process and Zoom webinar opportunities. And
so you're using Zoom, which is basically an online engagement platform. That's what we're using right now, obviously having this conversation. And so can you talk a little bit about what the hesitancy was about? What were they afraid of?
I think a couple different things. The first thing that they were a little nervous about would be the opportunity for people to be able to chat. So within Zoom, you have the opportunity to send chat messages, which everybody that is participating can see. Now, we took it a step further and did some investigating with the Zoom webinar concept and piece. And that's really, by having Becky involved in this and really doing a lot of practicing to make sure that it was going to work, we were able to control that and ease the fears of those town staff members.
So how much practice did you have to do with the agency?
Practice with the agency. We had one meeting with them, one Zoom meeting with them to just walk them through the opportunity that we were proposing or offering. And then we actually had another meeting to really walk through the whole process on the Zoom webinar. And then we did, right before the public meetings, we all connected about 30 minutes ahead of schedule of the actual public meeting schedule time, just to make sure everything was working. So it wasn't, I'll tell you what, the first one, we were all nervous. The second one went much smoother. So, you work through those kinks and if there's any questions. The other challenges with the webinar, so when those public meetings took place, we did have some concerns about people chatting, and that was, like I said, their fear is to, you didn't want an advocate of one particular area to be engaged in that meeting process that might steer you off track. So we basically give the opportunity for the chatting to they could ask questions in the Q&A section of the Zoom webinar for question and answering. And then our panelists that were involved, which was myself and then some of our other team members, and the staff from each of those cities were able to participate and help answer any questions that might have come up through the Q&A. And it takes a little bit of teamwork. I mean, we're working closely with those towns and cities and their staff to really push it out there, because with the Zoom webinar, we are requiring for these public meetings that those participants who want to be engaged have to register.
Mm-hmm.
So they have to go into the Zoom link and actually sign up to participate in that webinar.
Yeah,
So,
I know through our research, I know there's some concerns about the security of Zoom, and obviously there's been some Zoom bombing and hacking and things like that out there. It's true with all of the different online mechanisms and methods that we have. But I think, by having people having to register and being able to have a controlled, moderated webinar, we have found, especially with working with Becky as a facilitator, that we just really limit the potential that somebody's going to come in and actually mess up a public meeting, which I know is always the thing that we're like, do we want? So you saw none of that, right? It was all.
No, it was all, I mean, we had, I think, maybe one or two individuals, really just one individual in one of those meetings that kept making snide, not really snide comments, but just comments related to taxation and things like that on one of the meetings. But if it's a question that we can't answer right back as a panelist to those folks asking questions, then we'll say, we don't know the answer to that, but we'll certainly be happy to reach back out to you if you share your email with us.
For you as a professional, are you excited about using this methodology going forward, or what's your thoughts about it?
I think it opens the door. I mean, it opens the door to communities to be able to offer this. And some folks would rather or prefer to work straight from their home versus, having to go at 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock on a Wednesday night, or Tuesday night, whatever, during the week to City Hall for, a public meeting. So it definitely leaves the door open for some really unique opportunities. Yeah.
Well, anything else that you would like to add today that I didn't talk about?
So the other unique piece of this is, we go through the presentation. And so the folks that are actually signed on to the webinar are actually seeing a presentation that we would have typically put up on a screen, a PowerPoint presentation in those meeting rooms. So they're actually seeing that whole process evolve. And so they're able to be engaged and participate that way. There's another thing, as you go through some of these presentations, sometimes they become a little monotonous as you're speaking. And there's a unique way that we've integrated into our meetings, and that's basically taking polls. So we have folks participate and engage by answering a poll that we would, throw into that process to just as a break, as a
well, it also helps people engaged. I mean, I know sitting for an hour is kind of like, okay, I'm getting a little tired, or start petting their cat, or
that's right,
other things. And this anything that we can do to help keep people engaged and participating is always a good thing. Great.
Yeah. So overall, I think we were pleased. I look forward to many more opportunities to be able to have the community engagement at this level. I think it certainly raises the bar for us as an organization and offers those communities and anybody who's interested really to try to really maximize and quantify their participation levels as well.